the employee that actually was shot and killed on January 6th was actually dead.
There we are.
Yes,
So it looks
Mr.
like-
Mr.
I'm sorry, go
Chairman,
ahead.
you can begin whenever you like.
Oh, wonderful. I think we've got some folks online ready to start. So let's do this, please. It's Tuesday, May 13th, 2025. It's a pleasure to see all of you once again. This is the Little Hoover Commission meeting on Government Reorganization Plan 2025. Good morning. I'm Pedro Nava. I'm the chair of the Little Hoover Commission, and thank you all for joining us today. We'll be joined by any number of commissioners already, and some will join us shortly. Vice Chair Anthony Cannella, Commissioners David Beyer, Dion Aaroner, Gil Garcetti will be joining us. Jose Atilio Hernandez, I see him up in the corner. Jason Johnson, Gail Miller will be with us, along with Jana Sidley, who I think probably signed on at around 9:30 this morning. Also joining us are the legislative members of the commission. We'll have Senator Christopher Cabaldon and Senator Roger Nilo. I've been so told by Ethan. How do you do, Senator Nilo? It's always a pleasure. Let's see. Also with us is commission staff, Executive Director Ethan Rarick, Deputy Executive Director Tamar Foster, Project Managers Crystal Beckham, Daniel Harris McCoy, and analyst Ashley Hurley and Shara McAllister. We've got to do a little bit of housekeeping. We are live streaming and recording today's hearing on Zoom. Following the hearing, staff will place a permanent link to the recording on our website and upload it to our YouTube channel. As with all commission meetings, we will have a public comment session. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker for a total of 30 minutes. If you are attending the meeting at a physical location, please let staff know that you want to make a public comment. If you're joining us remotely and you want to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. And now to the substance. Last month, Governor Newsom submitted to our commission a plan to reorganize important parts of California government. Under the governor's plan, the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency would be split into two: the California Housing and Homelessness Agency and the Business and Consumer Services Agency. Under the state's governmental reorganization process, our commission is required by law to study the governor's proposal and to issue a report recommending whether it be adopted. As a part of that process, we held 2 days of hearings about that proposal, taking testimony from Newsom administration officials and a wide variety of stakeholders. Today, the commission will discuss the governor's proposal and provide guidance to our staff as they prepare a draft report. As commissioners know, they have been provided with background materials outlining various options the commission could choose to recommend: that the legislature reject the plan, that it be approved as submitted, or that it be approved with companion legislation. That material is available on our website. I believe that this process allows us not only to assess the governor's proposal as submitted, but in a broader sense, to assess the affected policy areas. We anticipate meeting again on May 29th to consider the draft report. We will reflect the guidance given to staff, which will reflect the guidance given to staff today. We look forward to meeting our statutory obligation and submit our report to the legislature and governor by June 4th. Today, after the discussion of the reorg proposal, the commission may take up a draft report on public philanthropic partnerships if there is time. And now, please, I'd ask the Executive Director, Ethan Rarick, to introduce the public comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we will move into public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the total public comment period is limited to half an hour. If you have joined via Zoom, use the raised hand function. If you have called into the meeting, please send an email immediately to littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. You must give us your phone number. That's all you need to give us is your phone number so that we know who to unmute. But if you have joined by Zoom, please use the raised hand function. That is much easier. Again, 3 minutes per speaker, please. And the public comment period is limited to 30 minutes. Commissioners will be able to hear you, but not see you if you make public comment. I can see that we have no one in the room who is indicating a desire to make public comment, but I believe we have several people online who have done so. Shara, can you please identify the first commenter?
Yes, our first speaker will be Kate Gordon. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
On.
Yes, perfect. Thanks so much. California Forward. I represent California Forward. I'm the CEO of the organization. We are a statewide nonprofit that serves as interconnective tissue between the state and the state's regions, leading a movement to create a more resilient and sustainable and inclusive economy. Thanks so much for the opportunity to comment. I want to offer 2 key points in response to the reorganization proposal. First, California Forward strongly supports the creation of the California Housing and Homelessness Agency. Our housing crisis demands aligned leadership and more streamlined delivery of housing. The fragmentation of state functions related to housing and homelessness has contributed to both policy misalignment and gaps in implementation. Establishing this new agency can unify programs and funding streams and help local and regional partners deliver better outcomes. But second, we see the reorganization as an opportunity to examine California's long-term approach to economic development. Specifically, the reestablishment of BCSA creates an opening to discuss how the state organizes and sustains economic development infrastructure. Currently, GoBiz leads much of this work and has achieved notable progress, but as an office rather than a cabinet-level agency, its influence and stability vary greatly across administrations. A more enduring structure, such as elevating GoBiz to a cabinet-level agency or evolving BCSA into becoming the state's formal economic development agency, could bring continuity, coordination, and strategic focus to this critical function. We encourage the Little Hoover Commission to explore the potential value of a cabinet-level economic development agency, exploring options like transforming BCSA into a state economic development agency, given its upcoming activation and historic role in interagency coordination, or elevating GoBiz to cabinet status to institutionalize leadership in economic strategy, investment, and innovation. Each option has merits and trade-offs, but a durable, well-resourced state partner is essential to support California's regions as they navigate climate transition, workforce transformation, and post-pandemic economic recovery. We are working at California Forward actively with partners statewide to envision a more coherent and durable system for state-regional collaboration on economic development, and we would welcome the opportunity to contribute to the Commission's analysis. Thanks so much for your attention, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Alex Schafrin. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Alex, go ahead, please. Alex Schafrin, if you wish to make public comment, please unmute yourself. Shara, why don't we go on to the next speaker then?
The next speaker will be JT Herchmek. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name is JT Herchmek, the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California. We represent nonprofit developers across the 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area. We strongly support the creation of the California Housing and Homelessness Agency. This agency will streamline our state's fragmented housing finance system and create meaningful difference for our members, the developers that work to build thousands of units of affordable housing each year. Again, we urge your support of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Veronica. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Good morning. I'm Veronica Beatty, the Policy Director for the California Coalition for Rural Housing, or CCRH. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment today. CCRH is one of the oldest state low-income housing coalitions in the country, and I want to reaffirm that we fully support the creation of a California Housing and Homelessness Agency. We believe this is long overdue and a critical step needed to better deliver on housing priorities and commitments and help us speed up housing production and homelessness service delivery across the state. Rural California communities are often overlooked, under-resourced, and understaffed, despite facing increasing housing instability. We believe this proposal can reduce the time and costs associated with financing development and loan closings, and really allow rural communities to do more with limited resources. We also believe that this reorganization can greatly increase transparency into the awards, regulatory, and appeals processes. It can be a little obscure, particularly when we're trying to layer less commonly used housing programs. And we believe that that transparency can help us build support for funding resources across all of the state's communities. We hope that as this conversation continues, we can bring in ideas around how to better align across programs, really make the best use of our federal housing funding resources that are delivered by the state, especially in our disaster affected communities and in our tribal communities. So again, we're excited to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Courtney Powell. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to provide comments today. My name is Courtney Powell, and I'm the Policy Manager at Resources for Community Development, or RCD, as we're known in the field. We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating and preserving affordable housing for people with the fewest options in the Bay Area. We provide over 3,000 affordable rental homes and have an additional 1,000 units that are in pre-development and construction. I'm here this morning to express our strong support for the governor's reorganization plan to establish a new California Housing and Homelessness Agency. We see great potential for the CHHA to accelerate the distribution of affordable housing resources and increase alignment between the state's various housing programs. More broadly, we're hopeful that this reorganization will be the first step towards creating a single governance structure for state housing financing, including low-income housing tax credits and tax-exempt bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Matt Schwartz. You now have the ability to unmute yourself. Oh, okay. It looks like our next speaker will actually be Eric Vasquez Izguerri. You now have the ability to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Eric Vasquez, the Education Advocacy and Government Affairs Associate at EAH Housing. For more than 50 years, EAH has been one of the leading nonprofit affordable housing developers along the West Coast, including California and in Hawaii, serving over 25,000 residents across both states. We are here in proud support today for Governor Newsom's reorganization plan to establish the California Housing and Homelessness Agency, or CHHA. Sorry. As practitioners in the affordable housing sector, we see firsthand the fragmentation and inefficiencies that arise from a system where housing and homelessness programs are spread across multiple agencies with overlapping jurisdictions and inconsistent accountability. Creating CHHA will provide a much-needed centralized structure to align policy, streamline funding, and ensure that California is delivering results, especially for the millions of Californians struggling with housing instability and homelessness. At EAH Housing, we believe that smart, responsive governance is essential to scaling up affordable housing solutions. We applaud the governor's vision and we urge the Commission to support the reorganization plan. It is a necessary and strategic step towards ensuring California's housing system is not just reactive, but coordinated, accountable, and proactive in meeting the state's urgent crisis. Thank you for your time and your commitment to striving for good housing policies for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shara, Ashley, we have no emails. Is that correct? Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, we have completed public comment. We can close out item number 1 and move to item number 2, which is commission discussion. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, the staff background material provides various options. The commission can recommend rejection, approval as is, or approval with companion legislation. We've provided 12 options based on the testimony and comments the commission received, but I stress the commission is not limited to those options. You all can make whatever choices you wish to make. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, we're really here to answer questions today, but I'll turn it back to you for whatever discussion the commission may wish.
Thank you, Ethan. Let's turn to commissioners. I'm looking for the raised hands or the look of anxiety, encouragement, excitement. I'm going to go with Senator Nilo, followed by Commissioner Byer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm new to the commission, obviously, and came in just as this issue was being discussed. It was introduced to me in my budget subcommittee, but I sat through the last session that we had. I didn't have a lot to say because I was just trying to catch up on what the details of the proposal are and try to figure out really what I thought about it. My initial thoughts, frankly, were not positive, but I have to ask the question, is the problem fundamentally organizational, or is it policy-based, or is it executional? And my observation, particularly with regard to housing and homelessness, is that the problems are almost entirely policy-based and executional. As a sort of a free market conservative, the state can have an impact on housing development, both positive as well as negative. And but beyond that, it's the private sector that really develops the housing, and they develop the housing based upon demand and ease of development. And public policy in this state, both at the local and the state level, make actually constructing things a little bit difficult. And I think a lot of that, therefore, is policy based. And with regard to homelessness, it has been an abject failure. I can't express that enough. Under the current administration, we've had an almost total top-down approach to homelessness. Up until the year before last, there were some 30+ programs addressed at homelessness. All but one of them top-down, specifically dictated for counties to execute as the state defined them. Only one program provided flexible funding to counties, and that's completely different than historically the way Health and Human Services are provided, and that is the counties provide services, not a complete top-down approach. And in my mind, predictably, during that period of time, homelessness just absolutely ballooned. And so I would suggest that the problems that the reorganization is trying to solve are largely problems of public policy and execution. And so I have a very hard time agreeing to approve this reorganization, compounded by the fact that by the time this thing just gets started, the governor's going to be out of office.
Thank you, Senator. I think as we go through the course of our meeting, we're going to hear a variety of opinions from the various commissioners, and we'll just see how all of those line up in terms of when we try to reach a conclusion. Thank you, Commissioner Byer.
Thank you, Chair Nava. I appreciate the remark.
Johnson.
Pardon me?
Followed by Commissioner Johnson.
I want to thank the senator for his remarks. I would differ slightly in the sense that I believe the reorganization is sound and we should support it. And we should offer suggestions on companion legislation. So in the sense that the senator is pointing to public policy and/or execution, that's the "and" part of that sentence. The reorganization does perform a useful function, and one where there's a virtual unanimity among the affected stakeholders that it's a wise idea because it offers the opportunity to focus more acutely on housing and homelessness rather than mixing it into a kind of grab bag of different functions ranging from cannabis control and occupational licensing along with housing. So I think the administration has done a very good job of outlining the need for a reorganization, that is the two agencies. I do have a lot of questions about the potential companion legislation, how to structure it and the content. And I won't go through all of the suggestions I would have on the companion side. So I'm just going to stick with the why we should support the reorganization plan as submitted, focusing a little bit on the implementation of the reorganization plan. As the chair and other commissioners know, we do not yet have a budget assessment from the administration, but that's expected this week as part of the May revise. That's an important component. And in addition to the hearings we held, staff did a great job of reaching out to other stakeholders and to the administration, asking a series of follow-up questions. Some of the questions that occurred during our hearing involving organized labor or what buildings would be required, et cetera, I think have been satisfactorily answered. So I don't have a question about the legislation that was submitted, but rather about the companion legislation that should accompany it. As Rahm Emanuel, Barack Obama's chief of staff, said, we shouldn't have missed the opportunity to use the crisis. In this case, the crisis of housing and homelessness requires more than reorganization. And so in that sense, I agree with the senator. The question is, what's the companion legislation look like? How would it be considered by the governor, by the legislature? What's the time frame? What's the content? And I believe the commission's previous work on housing and on occupational licensing give us some standing to comment substantively about what the companion legislation should look like. And I look forward to talking about those items in a subsequent comment.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Byer. Let's go to Commissioner Johnson and let me know who else wants to come up after him. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioner Byer. I agree with much of what you have shared, Commissioner Byer. Senator, I appreciate the comments you made around the seriousness of the problem and the need for solution. And what I have heard through these hearings we've conducted, both the oral testimony as well as the written testimony, is that there is a wide range of organizations that have analyzed this suggested change, and what I'm hearing is an overwhelming amount of support for this, this idea of trying to take these currently separate issues that are being addressed separately, namely affordable housing and homelessness, and trying to find a way to bring the objectives together under a single roof to hopefully reduce some of the problems and challenges that you've highlighted. This is a solution that's being proposed. You make the point that it won't go into effect until towards the end of the current governor's term, but that shouldn't really bear on whether it is an appropriate and could be an effective solution. I would hope that the next governor would continue the policy if it's showing some progress. And I think it's just clear from what we've heard in testimony that there is a need for a solution. This is a very viable solution without any really significant consequences to it. So my opinion is that we should support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner John. I have Commissioner Hernandez followed by Commissioner Sidley.
Good morning, everyone. I'm actually indifferent in terms of creating a new committee, but what I do like is that it's an opportunity to do things better. I think we got that from the testimony. There's an opportunity that folks are galvanizing. I did talk to a couple of individuals, and they used the transportation department as an example when it was all brought under one roof, and it really kind of did things a little smoother. But I mean, my recommendation is do things better and recommend legislation how to do things better. And it's all a matter of function and results. So definitely having metrics. I think we talked about that throughout, having some kind of reporting mechanism, benchmarks, so we have clear results. The other aspect is that everyone talked about how great TCAT and CLAC work. So it doesn't make sense kind of messing with that. I mean, my recommendation would be just augment that. But given that there was going to be another one created, sure, but there needs to be some kind of coordination. So I do like the MOU idea or some kind of coordination idea. One-stop shops, we brought this up in the AI conversation. There are so many ways to improve and make things more efficient and more cost beneficial in terms of using AI. So maybe not just limited to kind of homelessness, seeing kind of there's an opportunity to connect it to other state programs. I know that's even far beyond, but it is possible. So I would recommend, I mean, thinking out loud how to make overall the efficiency of the programs work. If it's through the combination, sure. But I do think that we can take time and make substantial recommendations how to improve the programs overall.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sidley.
So thank you all, and I appreciate the comments that have come prior to mine. I am actually supportive of this change, and I'm supportive of it coming from a background of being in government. And I just think that we get siloed in our departments, and for some reason we look at a different department as an enemy. And so the fact that all of the homeless and housing issues are not under one roof creates a friction that should not be there and needn't and cannot remain, because it is an issue that must be addressed, must be solved. And so do I think this is the ultimate solution and a panacea? I do not. Do I believe, though, that it is steps in the right direction to help with communication and help with policy coordination? I absolutely do. In terms of the financing, as Commissioner Byer brought up, and I think that what we heard in the testimony, that whether there's this new agency or not, the feeling is that more FTEs or more employees will be needed no matter what. So I think that some of the costs that we might see, it would be there anyway. So I am not put off by the fact that I don't currently know the budget numbers, nor am I really afraid that what those budget numbers will be significant. I do think we must keep a sharp eye on the budget, and we need to be very careful. And I think that the governor and the team is very aware of the costs. Certainly the latest numbers I've heard is that there's going to be another big deficit due to federal dollars that are not coming into the state. And so I think that people are going to be looking very closely at the numbers. So that's always a caveat. I think you have to be vigilant about the cost. But given what's at stake, and given that we must make improvements on homelessness and housing, I am supportive of this reorganization. So thank you for your time.
Of course, thank you. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members. I agree. Those are really thoughtful comments. I have a clarification, and I'm not sure I fully understand the process, but in terms of the budget, that I do think is a really important question. When I look at the page, well, I'm on the PDF, but it's the Bish wrote a letter and responded to specific inquiries. I have a comment on that, and then a little bit more of a general comment before we get into the and of Commissioner Byer's comments. I read this as this will not have a cost, and we will not see it reflected in the May revision. So the answer, just for everyone's awareness, is to the extent the GRP will require initial staffing to establish the two agencies and stand up a new funding committee, these positions will be filled through existing staff and position authority to the extent possible. Over time, the creation of CHHA and the funding committee is expected to improve program alignment and support consolidation efforts. Any new resources requests would be subject to the normal budget process. So I say that because I think it's a really important point that two things are true. One, that this initial reorganization is assumed by vacancies and other opportunities that all departments have. I do think, Commissioner, you are right that there's a deficit this year in California, and I think that's just a really important point when we come up with our final report. And two is that any additional cost that goes through the budget process, and I know the Department of Finance is capable of this, should really be offset by the efficiencies. So while we're waiting for the May revision to come out tomorrow, what I would expect is that there is no line item in the budget for this reorganization, because of the proposed reorganization is to create efficiencies. And I think the best way to do that is not with new funding. So I would just say one point to clarify in our final report. I think what we're doing today is preparing for the final report, right, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
And then two, the one thing, and I know that the timing is short, the letter does a really good job summarizing cost savings. I think the second thing, before we go into the planning, which is laid out quite well in that letter, but is a timeline. So there's sort of two costs to how we develop housing in California. One, I think we've settled quite well. This question around timing and what we can do with local governments is not yet addressed. And I do think that's an important part of the project. So I too am generally supportive. I do think that some of these recommendations, and when you're ready, Mr. Chair, to get into the and from Commissioner Byer, I think those are really, really important points, because to the senator's initial idea that if we don't implement actionable steps, that's when we don't start to see the change that we've all been looking for. So I think those are just my initial comments, is clarity on the budget and that it'll be assumed by existing positions and efficiencies. We definitely need some clarity on timelines. We need to make sure that all California State Departments understand timelines and can better implement them. And then 3, when you're ready to talk about some of the other pieces. But those would be 2 pieces of clarity I would seek quickly.
Very good. Of course, thank you. I have Commissioner Garcetti, and then I suspect at some point Commissioner Aroner and Vice Chair Cannella will offer comments. But Commissioner Garcetti, your turn.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I missed a few of the speakers. I had another meeting I had to be at, but I also want to be heard on this particular issue. I'm in favor of the reorganization, and I'm in favor for one main reason, and that is this whole area needs a kick in the butt, and this might be it. I'm looking at the fact that you have a governor who's only here for 2 more years, and I think he would want to push this as much as he can as long as he's governor. Would there be cost savings if we didn't have the reorganization and the legislature did make some changes? Yes, but for me, that's a big if. Whether the legislature would make those changes, they might indeed. But my bottom line is, it's probably going to be expensive, but for getting to the goal of more affordable housing, this is a kick in the rear end for the state as a whole to understand we need to do something, and we need to pick up not just the pace, but the fairness of the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcetti. Commissioner Cannella, and then Commissioner Aroner.
I was hoping to go unnoticed, but since the chair called me out, I will offer my perspective. I'm indifferent, as the other commissioner mentioned, that this is within the governor's prerogative to reorganize the departments. I felt like his staff did an excellent job presenting it, and the witnesses were all supportive. I mean, there was nobody that was in opposition. I just feel like I said, that this is within the governor's prerogative, so I'm going to be in support.
Thank you, Commissioner
Aroner. So I must admit that I'm kind of agnostic as well. My first thought always is you're rearranging chairs on the deck. Does that make any difference, really? But what I am interested in and supportive of, if this huge agency is divided into 2 agencies, the attention is going to be paid, but I think there's going to be closer attention paid to the receiving agencies, right? Particularly in the homeless and housing one, right? Where the lack of focus has been very difficult to watch historically now for almost 40 years in regard to the homelessness situation, right? And so I think if nothing else, I think attention will be focused on the Housing and Homeless Agency much more so than it has been in the past. Having said that, though, on this idea that it's going to, whether or not the actual reorg is going to cost money, I don't believe it did. I don't believe it will. I just lived through a reorganization at the Health and Human Services Agency, where child care came over from education over to social services. they moved staff. The staff moved from one agency to the other, right? There was no overall cost to the reorganization plan until they started dealing with what kind of services they wanted to add or that kind of thing. And so where the cost is going to, I think where the cost is going to happen, obviously, is if it works, particularly around the housing and homelessness one, they're going to be more effective at actually not only appropriating dollars, but actually spending them and having some results. And so that's going to generate more costs, but it's not because of the reorganization. The reorganization itself is not the cost. It's the cost of whether or not their services improve and whether or not we actually get better at this, so that we can see if we can, create more housing using we're very smart. I think we decided we were like 5% of the housing market, the funds that the state puts in. I think that's what staff came up with. It's a very small amount that we actually, out of the billions that are invested in housing in California. So I think it would be fine to separate the agencies out, right? I just think that more attention to be paid on each side of them. And so that to me would be beneficial. But I want to hear what Commissioner Byer has to say, because for me, it's kind of in legislative terms, it's support if amended, right? So that we need to, I have no problem supporting it, but I think that there are certain suggestions we need to make in regards to further legislation or whatever to ensure that it might actually be successful.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, before I turn it over to Commissioner Byer and Hernandez, it just as a suggestion, it seems to me as though in hearing from the commissioners, there is almost all of the commissioners agree that there should be the reorganization. That there's, other than some of the remarks from Senator Mila, who's expressed his reservations about it and where he thinks remedies might lie, it sounds to me as though clearly the commission favors supporting the creation of the two agencies. And if unless there's some severe disagreement, then perhaps the next part of our conversation could be about our role in making recommendations to the legislature on how we sharpen the focus on what happens with the agencies, assuming there is a reorganization. From my perspective, what I have come to appreciate is that the closer you can get to identifying someone who will be held accountable and responsible, the better it is, right? In other words, like I've always said, people react differently when there are witnesses.
Unknown caller.
Hi, unknown caller. And if what you accomplish through a reorg is that issues with housing and homelessness are now more focused on the people who make the policy decisions and execute them, then you're likely to have actually an incentive to get better results. So let me turn now to Commissioner Byer, Commissioner Byer, followed by Hernandez.
Thank you, Chair. I want to use the formulation the senator used and focus initially on the reorganization and then secondarily the and part that I referenced. I think the senator is completely correct that there are implementation issues. And the staff did a very good job in the first memo before our first hearing about how difficult government reorganizations are and the keys to success. And they cited the Government Accountability Office, IBM, Reinventing Government in other countries, other states. And there's some conditions for successful reorganizations. And I would hope that our report reflects those realities, because as the senator said, implementation matters. Having firm timelines, and as the chair said, having clear accountability from a single person, and outcomes measurements, things like that. So I don't want to dismiss the importance of implementation details, and I think we should go through those and point them out in bold letters to the legislature so that it's not just a let's check the box, because I think that would be a mistake. Most reorganizations fail, and we need to take that into account. So on the and part, the role of the state in housing is multifaceted, and it is not just with respect to affordable housing or housing for people who are unsheltered. Having said that, those two components, affordable housing and the unsheltered, are state and county and local government responsibilities. Having them all in one place is in my view, a smart idea. I have 3-4 ideas about what the and could be. And my suggestion, at least for this conversation, is not to thumbs up, thumbs down about the idea, but rather to look again at the wisdom of the following. One would be outside the context of the reorganization, merging the housing functions from the treasurer's office with the new housing agency. There are pros and cons. I think we should say to the legislature, they should examine that because only they can do that. We can't. And they can't do it as part of a reorg. Second, there are some housing functions that, homeless programs that are not in this reorganization. So you have a title, housing and homelessness, which is, in my view, misleading or incomplete. The staff has identified 10 agencies that have homeless programs that are not part of this reorganization. And I asked them to go through what they were, and some of them are pretty close fits. And the legislature ought to examine whether those things belong in a homeless agency, particularly for the following reason. The county representative said the lack of clarity about responsibilities, state, county, local government, gets in the way of resolution. So by examining programs from other agencies, the legislature could get a more complete view of accountability on homelessness between the levels of government and then what homeless programs really belong in this new agency. The fact that the Department of Corrections has a homeless program for people released from prison, or that the Department of Health Services has a housing program for people who are being released from mental institutions. There are legitimate questions about whether they belong in a homeless agency, but we and the administration, frankly, would be ill-served if we didn't examine that question. The other questions that I think the staff correctly raised in their memo of the 12 items were accountability measures, that is metrics. And my personal view would be that we ought to specify what they are. I know that's going pretty far afield from the reorganization, but if we do not take on things that we as Little Hoover Commission have previously reported on, like CEQA and its role in housing, even if it's a sidebar, to remind the legislature that CEQA is related to housing and that permitting is related to housing. Assemblywoman Wicks has put out a very good report on permitting. And so again, going back to the senator's formulation, the and part has to be substantive. We need to examine whether the treasurer's function should be merged, whether other homeless programs should be added, and whether the CEQA or permitting components should be taken up in a concentrated, focused way by the legislature after they act on the reorganization plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Hernandez.
Once again, too many erudites on this committee. Commissioner Byer basically went into what I was going to mention in terms of, yes, we should definitely talk about the metrics because there were questions early on and be specific. I mean, and one, permitting, but also reducing the cost of production. I mean, there's things that they should be focused at, increasing the participation in programs and reducing the time that it takes to transition out of some of the programs. That's just quite a few, but if we can go a little deeper on that. And then also want to recognize the great senator from West Sacramento. I know he's joined us, so I'll concede the rest of my time to.
Well, having said that, Senator Cabaldon, whether you had your hand raised or not, it looks like somebody raised it for you.
Yeah, thanks, Jose. And good morning. And I really appreciate all the commission's work on this as well. I don't have conclusions to share. I'm here to listen and to learn. I have raised questions about the reorg in the budget subcommittee that Senator Needle and I both serve on. And I come from both the legislative and the executive branch experience, as well as local and state government. I'm skeptical of reorgs as policy and as practice. And so I will say in subcommittee, I asked if we could take a look at a reorg plan and use a global delete to remove any reference to the words leadership, focus, sort of abstract concepts that were not operational. And if we might be able to imagine what a meeting in the cabinet secretary's office with her department executives might actually look like, what an agenda for the committee that would be convened in order to do the work, what the actual work products and workflows of a new agency might look like. Because these are all functions that they're not being brought together under the reorganization proposal. They are already together. As has been pointed out, that several of the functions that you might imagine being consolidated with Housing and Homelessness Agency, as Commissioner Byer has said, were not in the proposal. The treasurer's functions being the most significant among them. So these are already functions that sit within a single agency, an agency that does have a focus on homelessness and housing already. And so the focus and leadership doesn't emerge by immaculate conception. It does require that there be programs or decision processes or what have you that depend on that produce that. And it hasn't been clear from the proposal whether that's really here in terms of the outcome. So I don't object to the reorganization, but I remain skeptical that it will produce really any of the significant outcomes that have been described. I also think several of the points that have been made both on this call and in the documents around sort of aligning the similar approach with respect to one-stop shop's not quite the right term in this frame, but the same attention to the way that the state manages homelessness funding and policies needs the same kind of attention. The big idea here on the agency isn't the agency itself. It is consolidating the funding streams to the extent possible, at least for application and for allocation for affordable housing programs. That's the main idea in this whole proposal, which I strongly support is a major step forward. It's not complete without the treasurers, without the tax credit program, but that notion should be equally applied on the homelessness side, has been suggested by the commission staff as well. So so as I said, I don't have a problem with the proposal, but I'm not as convinced that it's going to lead to some of the things that have been talked about. The concept terms of leadership, focus, and accountability by themselves are not going to change by simply separating the agencies out without really focusing on the processes and the funding streams underneath them. And so I would join Commissioner Byer in saying we should look at some of those other elements as part of the proposal as well. And I should say also, just as the chair of the budget subcommittee, I will be surprised to see the reorg not having any cost implications at all, given the $500,000, the $1 million, the $2 million, the $10 million budget estimates we've received for every other minor reorg within agencies, that a new cabinet secretary and a new ledge secretary, all the that there will be some cost implications that may be absorbable by shifting from other functions. But the basic structure of a new cabinet agency can't be entirely for free without implications for other cost centers in the administration.
Thank you, Senator. It seems to me as though we are in that portion of our conversation that leads to the "and," as Commissioner Miller spoke to, and Commissioner Byer as well. So do we have any additional comments that touch on the part of what do we tell the legislature that we think they ought to be doing, assuming the reorg is approved and moves forward? I've got Senator Milo followed by Commissioner Byer.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Let me lower my hand. There we go. Couple of points of follow-up. Seeing that this is going in the direction of approving the reorganization, I'm concluding that if I'm a no vote, I'm the only no vote. But I have always said being the only no vote is a character building experience. But on the budget issue, a comment was made about a larger deficit because of impacts from the federal government. We do have a larger deficit than we thought, in the tune of about $10 billion, but it doesn't have anything to do with actions at the federal level yet. That's completely independent. The federal government has not even fully developed the budget yet. They're working on that. And we'll know more about that, frankly, after we pass our budget, which isn't anything new because the budget that we pass in June never has been the final budget. But I digress. With regard to the and in this, there's mention of other homelessness programs that are not part of this reorganization. And that kind of gets to the point that I was making about top-down programs. In my mind, with regard to Health and Human Services, the state's role is largely funding and oversight, not execution. Execution is best done in the counties. And therefore, to the extent that there are multiple programs, it's because different counties do different things. Modoc County is going to have different needs for homelessness than Los Angeles County is going to have. And I think the state ought to largely get out of designing programs that are implemented the same in Modoc as in Los Angeles. So that's one thing that the reorganization discussion doesn't talk about. And from my perspective anyway, I think that's very important. The other thing is in the reorganization, the discussion of homelessness and housing is as if they're the same thing. And I disagree with that. I do not believe that homelessness is entirely a housing issue. It is a multifaceted issue. And I personally believe it's far more has to do with life experiences and substance abuse and mental illness. And that makes a lot of the curing of homelessness look more like Health and Human Services issues rather than affordable housing. Not that affordable housing isn't part of it. It certainly is, but the other issues are. And one of my great frustrations in the time that I've been back here is I never hear anybody, at least in state government, talk about the goal of homelessness programs is to get people to self-sufficiency. I just never hear people say that. And I think any Health and Human Services program that's dealing with people that have fallen on hard times, either because of choices they've made or otherwise, that the goal has got to be to get people back to self-sufficiency. Not everybody can be, I'll admit that, but if this reorganization, I believe, has to point to that in addition to the issue of affordable housing. And I think those are the comments I'll make with regard to the and.
Thank you, Senator. Commissioner Byer.
Thank you. Two things on the staff agenda, number 1 and number 2. They haven't come up before, so let me just offer views. One is whether the Department of Real Estate belongs in the housing agency or in consumer services. My view, it's an occupational license and should be in the consumer services agency. And I have more to say about occupational licensing later, but it seems to lack a commonality with the rest of the housing programs and fits more neatly into occupational licensing. The second question about the Civil Rights Department, I understand that you could put it in consumer services, but as our witness said, the head of the Civil Rights Division, the housing mandate is a mandate and it changes the discretion of the department in terms of how to handle complaints about a civil rights violation in housing, which to me argues strongly in favor of keeping it in the housing function rather than moving it. So having made those 2 points, I want to agree with the senator Today's San Francisco Chronicle cites a 2024 state audit, and I'll quote from the audit. It says, California lacks current information on the ongoing costs and outcomes of homeless programs. That's not a good state of affairs. So one of the challenges that was addressed in Prop 1, which is $3.3 billion, was to introduce accountability and metrics around homeless programs. So part of, I think, our "and" component is to focus on what will be produced by the new agency, what are the programs within it, and how is it going to interface with predominantly the Department of Health and Human Services, with what outcomes and what time frame. The commission did many studies on mental health, which is obviously related to homelessness, and a theme of every one of those, I think it's 3 reports, was around accountability, transparency, and numbers. It would be a mistake, in my view, for the legislature to take up creating a new agency without being very specific about its expectations. Accountability, budget, and measurable outcomes, keeping in mind, as the senator said, that much of the execution on the homeless side is at the county level, but the state does fund it and can offer technical assistance. And so how we define success on the homeless part is vitally important.
Thank you. Let me look to any other comments or questions, remarks by any other commissioners. Because if not, we're going to have an early evening or a very short meeting.
Don't
let Commissioner Byer do it all.
So can I? So
Commissioner Miller, wait a minute. Has her hand.
I'm finished on housing, but I do have stuff on the consumer side.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I expect that. That's true. All right. Commissioner Miller, followed by Aaroner.
Well, I think just in terms of I guess I just want to make sure I understand the process. And I do think that the way that the staff actually put together the background is really great. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you ever go through recommendations one by one, but I just wonder if, just because of the way it's been laid out, if that could be a process, or if you wanted me to go through them. I apologize. I just don't know the process. I'm happy to speak to all of them. But I do think, for example, I mean, the number one goal, I would put it in a few categories, even before the first one on our agenda is organizational structure. I would call that organizational structure and budget. And I do think, one of the metrics we're looking for is efficiencies. I respect the senator's comments. And I think one of our priorities here is that there should be savings and efficiencies. There's a lot of different ways we've done reorgs. Because this is to create efficiencies, I would expect that we would maximize savings in the current system, especially as we look for the 8% reductions for efficiencies writ large in government. So that would be my first idea. And I agree with Commissioner Byer on civil rights. I don't know enough about real estate, but I do think it's worth one of the recommendations just in this category. I do think that one-stop shopping application is that really is one of our metrics. So I would love to include that and make sure that we're really clear on that opportunity. So I would recommend quite strongly for a very significant analysis on number 3 to transfer homeless programs and to create the one-stop shopping. But I don't know if that's the type of detail, Mr. Chair, you're looking for, because I think a lot of the way that the staff laid out the pieces are really helpful. So if we're here today to kind of go through them and say which should be in the recommendations, I'm happy to do that. I was just deferring to you on process, but I do think there's just a lot of great information in there that's worth, whether it's worth a consensus from you or some other method to review it. But there's just so much thoughtful information there that I'd like to see that in a final report. So you just have to advise me the best
Okay.
way to make sure that happens.
Here's what makes sense to me. And I what normally happens during the course of commission meetings is I listen to the commissioners and sort of figure out what direction people are going. And I think what you're doing makes perfect sense. And since you're already taking the wheel, why don't you go ahead and continue? No, it's great, because then what will happen is we'll get a reaction to the various recommendations. You'll have your remarks, and then the rest of the commissioners can follow up with what they either want to add or contribute to that conversation. But I think what you're doing makes perfect sense. So please continue.
Oh, great.
And I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Commissioner Aaron, Commissioner Aaron is holding up a finger, and it's not the middle one. So
Right. I wanted, Gail's got, Commissioner Miller is going exactly where I wanted to go. I think, right, the staff has put together a list of recommendations based on what we heard in the however many hours of hearings we held, right, with the 16 different testifiers, let alone the public. And so it seems to me we should go through them, because I think they capture what we heard. And then we could decide, do we like all of them? Do we like none of them? Do we want to prioritize them in a different way? Right, that kind of thing. But I think, I think we should take advantage of this, since they have, in a great way captured what I think we heard. So I'd like, I don't care who leads the discussion, but I think we should go through their set of potential recommendations.
well, I think what Commissioner Miller is doing makes perfect sense. Now we can decide, as she discusses each of the staff's recommendations, if there are remarks that commissioners want to make at that time. And that makes sense as well. So why don't you go ahead with where you were doing, Commissioner?
Mr. Chair, would I have permission to share the screen just so everyone on the public can see the same information we're looking at? Is that appropriate or no?
Yeah,
Sorry.
let's talk, Ethan, how do we make that happen?
I can do it. I just don't want to do anything
Oh.
because I have access. I just didn't want to do anything I'm not supposed to.
It's, sharing the screen is certainly at the chair's discretion. That's fine. I would just point out for members of the public, this information is also on our website. If you go to lhc.ca.gov, if you click on background memo 4, the commissioners are discussing the kind of matrix of policy choices or recommendation choices that are in that memo. So it's also Commissioner Miller on the website.
Oh, great. Thank you
Go
very
ahead.
much.
On the screen, I think it makes sense on the screen as well as the conversation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I mentioned, I would add one to organizational structure if the commission is amenable, just to include budget. I thought I heard consensus around not including real estate and including civil rights at this time. And then I think we had consensus around transferring other homeless programs and creating this one-stop shop.
I don't see any objection.
Great.
But can I ask, and I know I.
Senator Cabalden. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know I came in 15 minutes late, so maybe I missed all of I didn't hear that much discussion about all of these. I heard 2 people say something about each of them. Was there really broad consensus about from the commission on those items?
Right. What happened? Where there was consensus by the commission was agree that there should be a reorganization. That there should be a reorg. That the governor's proposal, as submitted, should move on to the legislature, and that the commission supports that. What we're doing now is having a conversation about the recommendations as set out by staff. The recommendations that are in our written document are based upon testimony that we heard from witnesses and things we learned at the hearing.
Understood, but I thought I just heard that Commissioner Miller said that, she heard consensus on the real estate and a couple of the other items, and I had only heard one person or 2 people say anything about them. But so that was my question, was whether I had missed a deeper conversation about these 12 recommendations from the staff.
Well, it wasn't about the 12. I think Commissioner Miller was correct in saying that with respect to the real estate and the civil rights, that there wasn't any objection by commissioners on the way that it had been characterized by Commissioner Byer. And I see Commissioner Sidley has her hand up.
My hand is up only to say that I have no objection to these 3 that we've just gone through. I mean, if it is better for the senator to actually hear from each of us as opposed to just asking, are there any objections? I'm more than happy to weigh in and say I'm very content with these three as written.
Okay.
Yep.
So Commissioner Miller?
Great.
So, but before we go off
Society.
number four, I think the senator's raising a good question, that the concept of one-stop shopping makes sense. And there was testimony from both academics, particularly the Turner Center at Berkeley, and other stakeholders. That concept could be executed today and is in part. And the big idea here is that if you have 9 buckets of money and each of them adds 3 months and costs millions of dollars, putting together a streamlined matrix where you don't have to file separate applications. You don't have to fill out the forms that are redundant. If the decision-making can be crisp, even if they're named different things, is a one-stop shopping concept. Having said that, the only data that I saw in the record was a citation by the California Housing Partnership, which claims that the cost savings from such moves would be between 500 million and $1 billion. I have no idea whether that's accurate. I would ask that the staff explore with the experts whether there is a concrete cost savings associated with the one-stop shopping, because that's the linchpin of the argument, and I think is the way to respond respectfully to the senator's comment about no airy-fairy visionary language. Let's talk about concrete outcomes. And if the one-stop shop is to work, how quickly are decisions supposed to be made, and what kind of cost savings are we aiming at?
I see Commissioner Hernandez has his hand up.
Just to kind of follow up on this conversation, that it's a great opportunity to connect to the AI study we did in terms of the one-stop shop. I think we showed kind of the potential cost savings there as well, in terms of reducing the number of times poor people have to prove that they're poor, and also connecting to possibly other programs. I do want to kind of also say that we should recommend the connection to the mental health programs. I think it was the California Partnership that echoed that as well. And this could be an opportunity to do that too.
Okay, let me get back to, all right, Senator Cabaldon.
Yeah, so then on these, the substance of them. So I think that on the affordable housing piece of the one-stop shop, that is largely self-evident, and I think the research is pretty strong in that space. On the homelessness side, there's a wide variety of programs and providers, and the challenge with One Stop without the AI or other solutions that Jose has mentioned is that then it means everybody has to submit all the information for all programs. So your one-stop application becomes quite intimidating for programs that are otherwise siloed. That's not as much of the case on the housing side, because they're sophisticated affordable housing developers who would otherwise be competing for several programs at once. But on the homelessness side, they're not all the same kind of program, just with different names or different funding sources. So I think it's the right concept, and I agree that homelessness should have the same attention in that process. But we should understand that we're not trying to create a system in which only the hugely sophisticated folks that can fill out a one-stop 500-page application is what's needed, because that's not always the case for some of the providers on the homelessness side of the equation. The other on civil rights, just want to note that I know that one of my colleagues our colleague on the budget subcommittee has also suggested an equally valid transfer for the Civil Rights Department is the Labor and Workforce Development Agency, which is a larger share of the department's cases than housing cases are. And so there's an equally compelling, which is to say all the potential options are unsatisfactory. There is no natural fit for the Civil Rights Department, but the Labor and Workforce Development is just as compelling case as housing and homeless for that department to sit.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Okay to continue? That's really helpful. Is it okay to move to the next section, Chair Nava? Okay. So the oversight pieces, the two, what we discussed a lot about, and this is to Commissioner Hernandez's point as well, this is the area where we can think through what metrics we expect. I imagine the legislature might be considering some of this as well. So this is obviously the agencies, and we get some of that timeline in the initial letter. I think we're looking for a little bit more. And then the other piece, and we heard from SEIU and others, just in terms of the formalized mechanism for feedback as this goes through, we had some ideas as a commission, and I think here these requirements seem to make a lot of sense. But
All right, turning with respect to that particular category.
Sorry, Pedro.
Wait a minute. Go ahead, Commissioner Byer.
So I agree with the way the staff depicted these, but note the important detail. We as a commission have struggled with aspirational goals set by legislation. An example is organic waste. Goals were set for 2025. We didn't remotely come close to them. We suggested that they be put on pause. We got a lot of negative feedback. There are other things, plastic recycling, where the state sets an ambitious goal and then fails to meet it, and it becomes difficult to restart the program without the same kind of aspirational vision. So in this section, I think the task for the legislature is to be realistic about setting goals, but making sure that they're tied to resources and measurable outcomes on a limited number of things. This is not an everything bagel. It's not reporting on every process and whether, the 14-day rule has been applied. It's, are more affordable housing units being constructed in a timely fashion at a lower cost? Are more homeless people, unsheltered people, put into shelter? In what time frame and at what cost? Let's not make this so complicated or so difficult to achieve that it becomes a line in a speech. This has got to be implemented by human beings, and let's not have any more procedural fetishes.
Okay, and I think one of the things to keep in mind as we go through these is staff is making, I'm watching Tamar, she's writing furiously. There's smoke coming off of her pen and the paper. So what will happen is when we get this document back, it is going to reflect in the best way that staff interprets remarks by commissioners to be included in the report. So I think that's helpful to keep in mind. So thank you, Commissioner Byer. Can we move to the next one? I think so. Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, of course. So next, we have some reforms that we discussed, and this is a little bit different because we have the issues around TCAC and CIDLAC, which are one of the many streams of housing finance. We spent a lot of time talking about this. The first idea is to keep them administratively separate, but create an MOU so that we can have information sharing. We spent a lot of time talking about the capital stack and how financing works across the affordable housing spectrum. The second is to actually recommend moving them. I'll defer to you, Mr. Chair, and when you're ready, offer my opinion on these two reforms.
Well, now's a good time.
Thank you. So I actually did get to serve on both of these. In my opinion, having an MOU at this time, if we believe that incrementally creating this agency and then hopefully in the future looking towards greater reforms, it would be a complicated move at this time. And while we held up CIDLAC and TCAC as great examples of something that's working, it did take 4 years to get them to be operational and to have them collaborate and coordinate. As Mr. Stivers described for us, there's a bonding process and three tax credit programs. And what I would hate to see is, for the sake of efficiency, by forcing them to combine, that we lose the current process that really has been working well, but for, 2 or 3 years. So what I would recommend is there is an MOU. We've done the same thing with the PUC and CEC and CalISO. None of these are perfect, but the more information sharing there is, the more functional it becomes. So in this case, I would recommend a version of 7 personally, but I obviously defer to the commission.
Let's open this up to what are people's thoughts with respect to this particular section and what Commissioner Miller has said she's observed as a result of her participating in both of those entities. And I see Hernandez.
I just give a thumbs up. I agree with Commissioner Miller.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand her recommendation. Gail, can you say it again?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm recommending the staff recommendations number 7. One is to keep everything where it is, but have an MOU in terms of these 2 programs at the treasurer's office. And number 8 is actually to move from the treasurer's office to this new agency.
Oh, I see. You're comparing. I'm sorry. You're contrasting it to number 8.
Yes, exactly. And I'm saying I'm in favor of number 7.
I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Hernandez?
So I would concur in terms of number 7 and say, in fact, give TCAC like even more money because they're working so well.
All right. So what I'm hearing, and the way that I interpret it, and who knows, I could have it all wrong, is number 8 is a fist, and number 7 is let's continue to cooperate. That's the way I hear it. And this goes back to the conversation we had at the hearing where I said, how are you going to make somebody give up what they already have? Senator Cabell.
Well, I think we could make somebody do that. as you know, I think that's definitely within the realm of possibility. I also think 7 is better than 8 at the moment, but 7 in its full glory, not continuing to do what we're doing now. I don't think that's not effective enough, and not just information sharing, but the processing of then the review of applications together, in a tightly aligned structure. MOU to me does make sense and if the agencies can't make that work, then we need to come back to 8. Potentially, but 7 deserves a chance to function effectively.
All right, so 7, right, with just a little more love between the parties, and then we don't recommend number 8.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I don't see anybody objecting violently. Okay, perfect. All right. Good job, Commissioner Miller. Next.
Thank you. I did reach out to Mr. Eric on the side to say that he would be much better suited to this than I. Okay, so consumer protection reforms. So I do think, if I'm correct, this is just to put a pause on it, Mr. Chair, this is the end of the housing recommendations before we move into consumer protection reforms. Okay. So I do want to point out that what is not included in these recommendations and that we don't have information on, and this is to to Senator Cabalda and Mr. and Canella as well. One is a recognition of the different local jurisdictions. I do think was a really important point that the commission made. And then 2, we added in the budget piece, but what we didn't add in is this, and it goes with the local jurisdictions, is a process, not just a reorganization timeline, but actually a permitting timeline. So the way we can make this more effective is having a bogey in terms of how long it takes. And Ms. Aroner, this was your point, from the day you go into the planning office until the day you're building a house. Like that was a piece of information we were looking for. So I do think that's an important piece, just in addition to these others.
I think staff can pick that up and see what that looks like. I have Commissioner Byer has his hand up.
Sure. Assuming we finished with the housing section, I want to go to occupational licensing a little bit to explain why, in the context of a reorganization that is about housing and homelessness, we should care about occupational licensing.
David, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. only because I want to find out if Sidley and Aaroner want to comment on housing.
Oh,
Is that what you
absolutely.
want to do?
I do, just extremely briefly. I think that somewhere in the report, we should say, as we're looking for these efficiencies, that to the comment that the senator made about, we were talking about streamlining the documents, one-stop shop. I think there should be a strong look at the documents that are required. I mean, are we over asking? Are we overdoing paper for no particular reason? Because I do think it should be one application. And so to the point where the senator had suggested, well, you shouldn't fill out a 500-page application if you don't need every piece of it. You know, yes. However, should you ever be filling out a 500-page application? I think is fundamentally flawed. So I just think somewhere in our discussion, there has to be a look at what we're asking for, and is there reason behind what we're asking for? Because we do get into a position where we over ask. And so I just think that somewhere in our recommendations, a shout out about maybe streamlining applications is important. So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Aaroner.
Following up on Commissioner Sidley's remarks regarding the application, I think, when I'm looking at these, when we look at recommendation number 4 under housing still, right, which is talking about getting, a one-stop, right, for the homeless, on the homeless side. And I appreciate Senator Cabaldan's remarks, because we have so many different kinds of agencies that are providing that kind of service. It's not as simple as construction of housing. I get that. But also, I think it has a relationship to our recommendation number 7, right? That if we're gonna talk about MOUs, right, then it seems to me that part of that discussion will be around how do we get to a simpler application process for these different revenue streams as well. And so, I mean, they go at least in my mind, they kind of go hand in hand. That is, it's just, that we maybe want to give some direction to what that MOU might want to include. And one of them is to start working towards a common application process. Because what we heard from everybody, if you remember the discussion about binders, right? I mean, it was quite dramatic, right? I was amazed that I don't think anybody brought a binder in. I remember doing that as a staffer once in the legislature, bringing case files in. So, because every time the legislature passes something, it usually requires another piece of paper to be added to somebody's application process, with nobody ever taking away, just as I think Commissioner Sidley said, do we ever take away anything? No, we never take away anything. We just continue to add until you get 500 pages. And so I think there's relationships between some of these things that should be noted in some way. That's all I wanted to say.
So Senator Cabaldan, this on housing.
Yeah, just to emphasize this distinction between housing finance and homelessness. That's the key point there. I think there's no question. There's compelling evidence that a one-stop shop on housing finance applications will both be profoundly impactful and is relatively easily done. The homelessness side, though, you end up with a 500-page application because you have to ask everybody, how many licensed social workers do you have working for you? And you're like, I'm only building shelters. Why is that a question? But you need to know that question for other parts of the program. And so I'm simply suggesting that with respect to number 4 on our list, that, sort of just saying we should do exactly what we're doing on housing and do that for homelessness too, isn't the same. It's not the same bucket. In that way, you also have a wildly different variation of applicants. Unlike for affordable housing finance, it might be a community nonprofit or a city or county or a continuum of care. There's a million different folks that are a species that are applying for these dollars. And so I think the direction is right, that we should have the same orientation for homelessness as we do for affordable housing, but recognizing that it's not so simple as simply consolidating down to a 2-page application for every one of the homelessness programs that there are.
Right. I guess what you're saying is this is a case where one size does not fit all. Yeah. All right. Now, Commissioner Byer, and I guess we're talking about licensing.
Right. Some of us were around in 2016 when the Little Hoover Commission wrote a report on occupational licensing And the staff helpfully included a summary of what we had recommended and the steps that have been taken since then. But let me take a step back and underline why this is an important topic in the California economy. In 1950, 5% of workers were licensed. Today, it's between 22% and 25% of workers. There are 200 occupations who have licenses and are going to be in the new consumer services department. And if we get the licensing wrong, there are harms to the economy and to consumers. So let me try and outline those. One, the fewer plumbers or electricians or hairdressers there are, the less competition there is, the higher the price. So there is a consumer economic component to this, and the stricter the licensing, the more problems you're going to cause for the economy. Second, worker mobility, the ability to go from non-college educated people to enter into middle-class jobs is impeded by unnecessary college degrees. The same logic applies here. An unnecessary or an onerous license prevents people who don't have the wherewithal financial to go to a community college or go to a four-year school. And if you have a licensing requirement that's 1,000 hours and it's unnecessary to protect consumers, you're shutting people out of the mainstream of the economy. Third, there are severe worker shortages in multiple occupations in California. Healthcare is one perfect example. It's not just doctors and psychiatrists. It's social workers, it's people with life experience doing mental health or addiction counseling. Across a variety of occupations, there are shortages, and the higher the licensing hurdle, the deeper those shortages get, which end up both costing the state more money because you have to hire visiting nurses or you have to pay at a premium. And then lastly, the process of reviewing the discipline of people within an occupation can be biased. And I think our witness from Vanderbilt and her book make a pretty strong case that you could use administrative law judges in the same way that we use as surrogates for making complex decisions with professional assistants, whether they're clerks or they're hired as consultants, and that you could end up with more regular procedures, more due process, and more consumer protection than having the industry itself or the occupation itself regulate itself. And then lastly, the fees that are set by the occupation itself tend to under-resource the degree of scrutiny those occupations receive. So one of the recommendations in the staff memo is to have an entity set the fees, but it's separate from and apart from the occupation itself. I recognize that if the legislature were to take up all those ideas, it would be an onerous task, difficult, especially at the end of a session. But I think we can advance the conversation by pointing out the central importance of occupational licensing and urge the new agency to take up a reform measure that's a little deeper than anything that we've seen before.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Miller, are you still interested in going through the list?
I am. I just didn't want to disrupt Commissioner Byer because he was it's a little bit of a different section. I actually agree with what Mr. Byer said. It's just further in the document. So I just didn't want to be disruptive at all.
That's kind. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I will. Give me 1 second. So if the public is following along, there's a section on that where the staff goes into really great detail on some of this. I think it's a really good point, especially as we look for alternatives for people to receive this certification. I do think there's some really great points in there. Sorry, I don't mean to make you all car sick with my driving. So, okay.
There is a section starting with
Yeah.
9, and I would say the biggest idea and the most controversial is a question of reciprocity. Our Vanderbilt witness pointed out that Arizona, with the strong support of the governor and the legislature, has gone to nationwide reciprocity on a series of occupations outside of healthcare, outside of medicine. Now, there are a bunch of arguments against that. My point is the new consumer agency should be looking at the barriers to entry because of the adverse effect on the economy and on the cost of living. So if affordability is a legislative priority and there's an abundance agenda orientation, this is a subject that's ripe for reform.
So this is a little bit, I don't know that I'm personally, Mr. Chair, I'm ready to opine on this. I think it's a really good point that definitely warrants more study. Is this less of a direction about this new agency, Commissioner Byer, and more of a recommendation for further reporting?
Well, this is part of the support the reorganization and
got it.
In other words,
so is how do we get a better understanding of reciprocity and fee setting in order to create greater opportunities and not preclude people from being a part of regulated professions. So you're sort of combining 9 and 10. Am I
right? So in 2016, we focused on service members who moved from, let's say, Texas to California. Congress passed a law to facilitate reciprocity for those service members who are transferring to a different state. That idea of reciprocity is one that breaks down barriers. We also recommended that former offenders, there be reforms undertaken, and the consumer agency did some of those things. I guess my point is that just as in housing, changing the organizational structure does not accomplish the public policy goal that the senator talked about in the beginning. We can't just move the org chart and expect a different outcome. With respect to occupational licensing, it's a vital consumer agency, but it's also a agency vital to the economy, and that's my point.
I do think that the process that we used on housing is the one that we ought to use as we go through these on the licensing and the consumer portion, because it keeps people organized and we all understand when we're looking at the same text. So if you could do that, Commissioner Miller, I'd appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. So the first one for consumer protection reforms is this idea of an independent enforcement body separate from the licensing boards themselves. And that's where there would be disciplinary cases. The idea being, and we didn't hear too much about this, but I think we have heard a lot about this in the past, is that there's some bias built into the current structure, and the having enforcement and licensing separated has long been a discussion that I'm sure all of you are familiar with as you dealt with a lot of these issues around. We used to call them turf, but I don't know if that's still an appropriate term.
All right, and any objection to what is being recommended? You're talking about number 9?
I'm talking about number 9, yeah.
Number 9. Any problem with number 9? Seeing no problem with 9, can we move to 10?
So this is the idea of an independent fee setting commission and potentially looking to the general fund. I would not support this, Mr. Chair, just because I've been through this through the budget. I think it's a slippery slope when we take professional fees and rely on the budget, because as we know, the budget is quite strained. I understand the argument for it. And this does speak to Mr. Byer's bigger point, which is that the best way to encourage mobility and economic opportunity is to not create these Byzantine processes for licensing, especially with the costs associated. But I don't think that the general fund is a backstop for professional fees. And I think we spent a long time in the 90s trying to actually not do this. So I wouldn't support it. I understand the point. I just it's not something I would support.
Did I hear Byer's voice back there?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay, so it looks, unless there's some, expression of support for 10, it sounds as though that is not one that we want to endorse as a commission.
Wait a minute, though.
There you go.
Wait, hold on. You could
Please. Go ahead, Dion, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Why can't you in that one, if the issue was not backing it, but to the potential draw on general fund, then just remove that sentence. Then why can't we create an independent fee setting commission to determine board fees based on operational needs? What's wrong with that? I think what I was hearing was is that Commissioner Miller doesn't want to attach it to the possibility that it could put a pressure on the general fund budget.
Fair point.
Yep, that's a great point. I
So
didn't
long
think
as it's from some other source, right? So long as it's from some other source,
well,
Dion, right? We should leave open the possibility that it comes from some source other than the general fund.
Absolutely, and the current board should not be setting their own fee schedules. That should be a separate operation. That's all. Okay.
That's a great idea. And I would just say that just like we did for the housing, the general frame is these licensing requirements have become an impediment to mobility and income for individuals. This, Mr. Byer, hope I'm summarizing. So that would be our introduction, is that if in fact some of this, the idea is to create opportunity and efficiency, that's our umbrella under which we are discussing each of these 4 items. Do I have that right, Mr. Byer-ish?
Yes. I mean, I think part of it is that if you don't, if the fees that are charged to the profession are too low, the agency, who is supposed to be both licensing and engaged in consumer protection, has insufficient staff, you lose 2 different ways: economic mobility and insufficient protection for consumers.
Yeah.
All right, subject to that modification, it looks like 10 will go forward. We're now at 11.
So this is about reducing the number of board members or creating requirements for the board members to serve on each of these boards so that they're more aligned with industry, consumer, and state interests.
Yeah, the staff has put together a list, which is in the background materials. I think I could be wrong on the numbers, but I think it's like 10 boards have an equal number of public participants, and some others have less public participants. The idea here is that accountability should flow to the public in at least equal part to the occupation that's being licensed.
Okay. Any discussion with respect to this one? Seeing none, we can move to the next.
And the last is the idea of quality and transparency of complaint reporting so that better decisions can be made. So I know this is one the legislature has tried as well in terms of making sure there's access to all of the complaints, and even if they're redacted, partially redacted, in order to ensure that trends and other long-term decisions can be made based on the information that these boards are getting.
Any discussion, conversation? Seeing none. Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, so that
Aaron. Commissioner Aaron, and then you, David.
Oh, sorry.
I just want to get back to Commissioner Byer's concerns regarding the barriers that are up regarding looking at the ability for reciprocity, because none of these recommendations deal with the reciprocity issue.
Right.
And it just seems to me that and I don't remember hearing, maybe I just don't remember, but I don't remember hearing a lot of discussion about the reciprocity issue, because people were mostly focused when they were testifying on, yay or nay on the reorganization plan. Not too many of them were focused on the add-ons. So, but I think that's an important statement to be made. And I don't want to do what Arizona did. I do want to include I do want to include the healthcare system, because that's in looking at reciprocity, because it's a huge issue there.
Yeah. On this one, actually think some staff work will be necessary.
Okay.
Because the arguments against reciprocity
Mhm.
have validity in the sense that it's very difficult to keep track
Oh.
of and be current on 200 occupations, 50 states.
Right.
It's a massive undertaking. And so it's possible we could come up with a recommendation to target a set of occupations for reciprocity or a process of review. There is a sunset review every 5 years. Another component to the
Right.
sunset process could be an examination of reciprocity.
Mhm.
There are a variety of tools, but I don't think we're prepared today to focus as acutely and as the requisite detail on reciprocity. So I would ask before our next meeting on the 29th that staff do some work on that question.
I mean, you know, there are 200 professions, but where are we looking at the ones where we're having a hard time attracting? Right?
Yes. Mhm.
Right. With all due respect to my hairdresser, right? I don't think we're having a problem, attracting hairdressers to the state of California, but we are having a hard time attracting many healthcare professionals and others, right? And also, just given what's going on in the federal level, it's going to become more and more difficult. So.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Breyer articulated with respect to how licensing can impact and interfere with all the sorts of things that we are interested in, and careers and upward mobility and economic opportunity. I think staff understands that we're going to want that as a tone and a reference in this report. So I think we might be at a point where I can ask Ethan to summarize, because now staff is going to have to take this wheelbarrow full of stuff that we talked about and commit it to paper. And it will certainly save an awful lot of time for us at our next meeting if they leave this meeting with a clear understanding, as clear as possible, as to what it is we've asked them to do. I want to thank you, Commissioner Miller, for taking that bull by the horns and taking us through the list. Much appreciated. Thank you. Ethan, your show.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I can just briefly summarize our understanding of the Commission's guidance for the draft report, and the report will obviously reflect the many comments on framing language and framing perspectives and so forth that commissioners have made. But here, I will not try to summarize all of those comments. We'll obviously include those in the draft, but here, just focusing on the specific recommendations for companion legislation. I think it appears the majority of the commission wishes to recommend that the legislature approve the plan and allow it to take effect, but with additional companion legislation. So focusing on the 12 items that we referenced in the background documents, my understanding would be that the commission wishes to recommend number 3, that is to say, a study of the transfer of some homelessness programs from other agencies into the new Housing and Homelessness Agency. You wish to recommend number 4, Senator Cabaldo noted that it may not be quite the right phrase, one-stop shop, but a consolidation of applications for homeless programs, however, noting Senator Cabaldo's caution against creating an overly complex application, and also noting Commissioner Sidley's question about whether or not all of the information is in fact needed, but some streamlining or consolidation of application for homelessness programs. Also, you wish to recommend a reporting requirement, including specified metrics. Some of you have mentioned specific metrics. We can mention those in the draft report. Here, I think we might wish to include, this is where we might wish to include Commissioner Miller's reference of a permitting timeline. That would be, I think, in effect, a metric on which the new agency would be expected to report. That would be my understanding of that discussion. Also, you wish to recommend item 6, creating a formal mechanism for stakeholder feedback on implementation. You wish to recommend number 7, that is to say an MOU regarding TCAC and CIDLAC and their requirements in working with the agencies that report to the governor. So the legislature would require those agencies to have an MOU, but not number 8, not actual consolidation. And then you wish to recommend the final 4 items with regard to consumer protection, however, striking the idea of drawing on the general fund to pay for the operations of an independent fee-setting commission. That would be, Mr. Chairman, my understanding of summary of what the commission has referenced so far. The final item I might mention is the reciprocity discussion that occurred at the very end. We can attempt to include something in the draft report. However, at the next meeting, we hope to bring you a draft report which you might be able to actually approve. And so my suggestion perhaps would be that on reciprocity issues, we might wish to produce a scoping memo, and the commission could regard that as a possible future study topic, rather than trying to specify steps the state should take now with regard to reciprocity, which industries, which states, is it all states, et cetera, et cetera. So if we try to write that into the draft report and bring it to you on the 29th, I fear that might be a little beyond the scope of what we've described in the background memos here. So I guess my suggestion, we can certainly try to put it in the draft report, but my suggestion might be that we produce a scoping memo and the commission consider whether or not that's a future topic you wish to undertake.
Can I make a suggestion on that one, Ethan? Because I think this is something that we've touched upon in the past, and I think you're right. This was not something that the staff was asked to look at so that we could have a full conversation about it, but there's always that but. But might it not serve a purpose if we were to have a sidebar in this report that references the fact that we do believe that the issue of reciprocity is one that needs to be examined and evaluated, and that the commission will be taking that up in a separate study. But it is certainly a topic that the legislature should give some thought to as it moves forward with the reorg.
We can certainly include that, Mr. Chairman, yes.
So let me ask the rest of the commission if they think that's good or bad. Dion?
I like it, but I just have a question because Ms. Ethan you didn't mention recommendations number 1 and 2 regarding the real estate and the civil rights departments.
Correct. My understanding, Commissioner Erner, was that the commission does not wish to recommend, the commission wishes to not recommend a change in the governor's proposal. That is to say that the commission wishes to just leave that as those placements as they exist in the governor's proposal, which essentially strikes item 1 and 2.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I saw a thumbs up from Beyer. Anybody else? Miller's okay. Aaroner's okay.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Commissioner Hernandez has his hand raised.
Oh, yes. Hi. Sorry, I missed that.
I know we mentioned that in terms of the connectivity, in terms of mental health dollars, mental health services. I know the one-stop shop kind of was going to be a place. Can there be somewhere else where we really kind of highlight the need? I don't know if it's in the metrics, but I mean, Senator Nilo, 100% correct. We can't deal with homelessness without also touching other issues, and mental health is one of those issues. So if we can expand on that, that would be great.
Yes. We can certainly expand on that either in the context of simply the text of the report and the framing language, or
a metric,
something. We could include that as a specific metric that should be looked at, or even a separate additional piece of legislation that would require some assessment of that.
And Commissioner Miller.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Mr. Eric, it's a little bit more than just the background. It's one-stop shopping for the capital stack and financing, and then homelessness, so that I think to Senator Walden and Senator Nilo's point, to really bifurcate those two. So there's metrics on both. We don't expect them to be together.
Correct. My understanding would be there that you're referring now to the metrics on the reporting. The one-stop shop on the housing programs is included in the governor's proposal. And so I don't think the commission would need to recommend that be done because that's sort of part of the proposal and you're recommending approval of the proposal. But in terms of the metrics, that could certainly be a metric on which there would be a future reporting expectation. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Looks like it. Yeah. Okay, so I know for sure that our senators had to stop at noon, So I think we've been able to accomplish the conversation and get their participation, which is really very, very helpful, because as we go through these things, we always keep in mind what is it that we're asking the legislature to do. And I think it's helpful if we have members of the legislature to offer their suggestions on how we move forward.
And of course, the rest of the legislature will do everything that Chris and I tell them to.
The way to get it going. You've got the ball rolling, my friend. So I think we have concluded our Ethan and staff. Do you think we've concluded the conversation with respect to the reorg?
Yes, I think we have the direction that we need, Mr. Chairman, to come back to the commission on the 29th with a draft report. That report will go to the commission before that, obviously, approximately the 22nd, and just for the benefit of members of the public, at the point at which the draft report goes to the full commission, it becomes a public document and will be posted on our website. We'll announce that we've posted it and so forth. And then the commission could take up consideration of that report on the 29th. If you all choose to approve it, that's fine. If you want additional changes, we would then have one additional meeting, which I'm still working to schedule, but we will be able to meet our statutory deadline, which is to produce the report by June the 4th. So I think we have the guidance that we need on that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
If it's
Let me ask, we've got one other item on the agenda.
Correct. I don't know if you want to take that up now, Mr. Chairman, or given the 2 hours of the meeting, you want to put it over to the 29th. That's entirely up to you.
My own feeling is we've had a great conversation, discussion, very focused on a significant statutory requirement before us having to do with the reorg. I'm tired. I don't know how anybody else feels. I just as soon that we conclude this meeting and take up adoption of that other report at a subsequent meeting. I see everybody nodding heads because they like what I just said. All right, everybody gets a Dove bar. So I want to thank you that you've all once again demonstrated the how it is that I like to live my life. I feel much better working with people who are smarter than I am, and you've all demonstrated that you are. And for that, I feel grateful and appreciative for your participation. So happy to work with all of you, and thank you for putting in the time that it takes to deal with this issue that I think is of significance to the administration and to the state of California. And thank you to staff. Were it not for staff, right? Were it not for staff, you would just have me just driving this bread truck right off a cliff. So thank you, everybody.
See ya.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.